All right, strap in, everyone, because today's deep dive is going to take us on a wild ride.
Oh yeah, this one's a roller coaster.
We're diving into a YouTube video. It's from Audio Story Podcast, and it's called Saving the Wife.
Definitely a title that grabs your attention.
Yeah, and the story itself is a real doozy. It's got love, betrayal, faith, the whole 9 yards.
And some seriously messed up stuff too, fair warning.
Right, so let's start with the basics. We've got this couple, Frank and Carol. They seem pretty happy, at least at first.
Yeah, they've got this great marriage going on, from what we hear anyway.
But then, boom,
Yeah.
Carol has this intense religious experience. Like, not just your average finding God kind of thing.
This completely upends her world. Her whole belief system gets flipped on its head.
And it drives a wedge right between her and Frank.
Because suddenly she believes any physical intimacy with him is a sin.
Whoa, that's a major shift. You could practically feel the tension building.
Yeah, their whole foundation is shaken. And Carol, she's vulnerable. She's searching for answers.
And that's where the pastor comes in. This guy, instead of offering genuine guidance, he sees an opportunity.
A chance to manipulate, to exploit her vulnerability.
And things get really dark really fast. We find out that Carol is having an affair with the pastor.
And she believes it's bringing her closer to God.
It's mind-blowing how someone can twist faith like that.
The manipulation is just staggering. He's using scripture to justify his actions.
So Frank naturally is devastated when he finds out.
He's heartbroken, angry, betrayed. He even thinks about revenge for a while.
Wow, that's heavy stuff.
But ultimately, he decides to leave to try and rebuild his life.
He starts dating another woman, Trish, but it's clear he's still hurting.
Yeah, he's trying to move on, but the wound is still fresh.
So he goes back to his hometown looking for some solace, I guess. Maybe some advice from his parents.
And that's where he meets Lori.
Lori is a pastor, but she's not like the one we've just met.
She's at a small, struggling church, kind of the opposite of the El Paso megachurch.
And she's got her own baggage when it comes to faith and religious institutions.
Oh, yeah, her story's just as heartbreaking.
Her pastor husband left her for a wealthy parishioner.
And it gets worse. She was pressured into sexual relationships with her former in-laws.
Whoa, hold on. That is just awful.
It's a horrific example of how faith can be twisted and used to abuse.
No wonder she wanted a fresh start. It's like both Frank and Lori have been burned by the very thing that's supposed to offer comfort.
Yeah, this shared experience creates a bond between them, a real connection.
They find solace in each other's understanding, and their relationship starts to develop.
It becomes more than just friendship.
And this is where the story really starts to get complicated.
Because we have Frank trying to heal, but also deeply concerned about Carol.
Right, he sees how deeply she's fallen under the influence of this El Paso church.
He recognizes the signs of manipulation, the cult-like behavior.
And he, along with Lori and her friend Pat, a psychologist, they come up with a plan.
A plan to try and rescue Carol from this potentially harmful environment.
It's like a mission to save her from this group that's twisted her faith.
But they know a direct confrontation won't work.
So they devise this elaborate plan.
Frank's going to pretend to want to join Carol's church.
He's going to infiltrate the group, gain her trust, and eventually they'll get her away from the pastor's influence.
And then comes the intervention.
But how will they pull it off? What will the intervention involve?
And will they be able to break through the mental hold this pastor has on Carol?
So many questions, so many unknowns.
That's where we'll pick up next time on the deep dive.
Buckle up, it's going to get intense. Last we left off, Frank had gone full undercover, right? Infiltrating the El Paso church to try and get Carol out.
Talk about high stakes. It's like a real-life spy thriller with a dash of religious drama.
And remember those wealthy investors we saw hanging around the pastor? The ones with the super creepy vibes.
Yeah, the ones who seemed a little too enthusiastic about those rituals.
Right. Well, Frank does some digging and uncovers some seriously shady financial dealings. It turns out they're not just donating money to the church.
More like funneling massive amounts into offshore accounts.
It's starting to look like this whole operation is a money laundering scheme disguised as a religious movement.
And who knows what else they're involved in.
So Frank, smart guy that he is, decides to contact the FBI.
Good call. This is way bigger than anything he can handle on his own.
But bringing in law enforcement also adds a whole new layer of risk.
Exactly. If the pastor gets wind of an investigation, who knows what he'll do?
Carol could be in real danger.
It's a race against time to get her out safely.
But in the meantime, the plan to deprogram Carol is still in motion. Frank manages to convince her to go on this secluded prayer retreat.
Isolating her from the pastor's direct influence. Brilliant move.
And that's where Lori and Pat, the psychologist friend, step in.
They pose as fellow seekers, all about finding spiritual enlightenment.
But their real goal is to subtly challenge the beliefs that have been hammered into Carol.
It's all about planting those seeds of doubt.
And I do it so cleverly, using scripture and theological arguments. Instead of attacking her faith outright, they encourage her to think critically.
To question the dogma that's been fed to her.
And you can see it starting to work.
The gears are turning in Carol's mind.
She's starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, things aren't as simple as she's been led to believe.
And this internal struggle is playing out against the backdrop of her rekindled feelings for Frank.
And her growing attraction to Lori, don't forget that.
Oh yeah, the love triangle heats up.
It's a lot for Carol to process all at once.
Just questioning everything. Her faith, her relationships, her entire identity.
But amidst the turmoil, there's a glimmer of hope. Carol is starting to think for herself again, to reclaim her own agency.
It's the beginning of a long and difficult journey.
A journey back to herself.
And it's a journey that will ultimately lead her to confront not just the manipulative pastor, but also her own deeply ingrained beliefs.
About love, relationships, and what it truly means to be free. We left Carol at a real turning point, didn't we? I mean, the FBI raid, her whole worldview crumbling, and these new feelings for Lori. It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, and the story doesn't try to sugarcoat it, does it? It shows just how messy and painful that process of deconstruction and rebuilding can be.
Totally. And for me, one of the most powerful moments is that conversation between Carol and Frank's mother.
Oh, yeah, that was intense. You've got these two women from completely different backgrounds with completely different belief systems.
And yet they managed to connect on a human level.
It's really beautiful to witness, isn't it? That willingness to listen, to try and understand where the other person is coming from.
Even though they might not agree on everything.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that empathy can bridge even the widest divides.
And for Carol, it's like that conversation gives her permission to start making her own choices.
She's not beholden to the pastor's dogma anymore.
Or to anyone else's expectations, for that matter.
Right. She embraces her attraction to Lori, even though it creates some complications.
Complications is putting it mildly. But it's also a sign of her growth, isn't it? That she's willing to step outside the lines to explore what feels right for her.
Absolutely. And it's not just about romantic love either. The story also highlights the importance of female friendship.
Oh yeah, the bond between Carol, Lori, and Pat is so strong.
It's like the supportive sisterhood. They lift each other up. They challenge each other to grow.
It's such a contrast to the toxic environment of the El Paso church.
Totally. And it shows how healing and empowering those genuine connections can be.
So what about Frank? Where does he fit into all of this?
Well, he's still deeply in love with Carol, that's clear.
But he's also grappling with a lot of complex emotions.
Jealousy, insecurity, fear.
It would be easy for him to try and control Carol, to demand she come back to him, to reject Lori.
But he doesn't.
And that's what makes him such a compelling character. He's willing to let Carol go, to let her find her own path, even if it hurts him.
It's a selfless kind of love, and it's not something you see portrayed very often, is it?
No, not at all. And the story doesn't wrap everything up in a neat little bow either.
Right. It leaves things open-ended.
We see glimpses of the new lives that Carol, Frank, and Lori are building. But the ultimate outcome of their relationships, it's left to our imagination.
It's like the story is saying that the journey itself is more important than the destination.
That growth and fulfillment come from embracing the unknown, the messy, the unpredictable.
And I think that's a really powerful message.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Saving the Wife.
Quite a ride, wasn't it?
It certainly was. We explored the dark side of faith, the complexities of relationships, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
And hopefully it left you with some food for thought.
Definitely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving